update it, revise it in accordance with the comp plan, and clean up, because it's the last time there was an overall rewrite of the zoning code was adopted in 1988. There's been many zoning amendments since that time. There were, some few inconsistencies here and there. That was part of the task of the task force, and they have created a draft ordinance that has been reviewed by the Borough's Planning Commission. The next step in that process would be ultimately to have a public hearing and for Borough Council to create an ordinance to adopt that new document at some point in time. Tonight's meeting is to review the work that the committee did for them to present that to the public. And then at some point, Mr. Bryson, the Smart Growth Committee, can ask questions, the public can ask questions or make comments, and we'll see where that takes us tonight. My recommendation is that the spend a couple hours tonight. I think after about 2 hours talking zoning, people's brains start turning to mush, and then we'll see where we are after 2 hours. And with that, I would suggest Ray Ott, our planning consultant on this project, that Ray take it from here and proceed with presenting to the public what the revised draft looks like.
Can I interject for a second?
Please.
Yeah, I think it's to be best. I know this isn't like we don't have an agenda and we haven't called to order. It'd be nice to just maybe have some ground rules for everybody so they're clear on the way the public meetings work, especially in this platform. Saying your name, address, all that stuff. I don't know if there's anything you want me to go over it. I don't know. But.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so if you want to speak tonight, please make sure you say your name and address for the record. I know that this is being recorded, but video recorded, but we should have that all on record, and limiting our comments to approximately 3 minutes. We're pretty lenient, but that would be it. So there you go. That's it.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Stefano. If I could just add one additional housekeeping item to that. Our plan is to have Mr. Ott go through the presentation here, and we'll save questions for after the presentation. So everyone can hold their comments. If you want to enter something into the chat, we will acknowledge those chat items after the presentation.
Okay, are there any comments from anyone else before we begin? Okay. Ray, are you there?
I'm here. I'm in with Kevin.
I have a comment, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, sure. Go ahead, Bill.
I just want to say that I've been poring over this thing, and this is a monumental document, and I'm really very impressed. And I'm just thankful that somebody else spent 2 years on it. And it's a good deal. I'm eager to get into this. I just want to thank the folks that worked on it, Ray and the borough manager and Kevin Gore, and I guess the people on that committee. Thank you.
I would agree with that 100%. Okay, just if anyone has their microphone on and you're not talking, could you mute it? We're getting some background noise here. That's bad. Okay, Ray, go ahead.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. I'm here with Kevin Gore in the Borough Hall, and we're in this small conference room. I just want to go over as quickly as I can what we did and what the key components of the plan is, and then allow a significant amount of time for questions. There's something just popped up on the screen here. Right? What's that about?
I don't know what that.
Can you X that off?
Disregard. It was button pushing.
Oh, okay. All right.
Ray, before you go on, are you able to get closer to your microphone? It's, the sound quality is not good.
I don't know. I mean, I don't think I can get on my computer here, but I can, I'm talking in this conference room and the microphone's on top of this humongous screen. So
Okay.
I got as close to the screen as I get, but if I get any closer, I see myself disappearing.
Ray, you sound okay. You actually sound okay. I can hear you fine.
You can hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound okay.
All right.
Okay.
All right, but since we're here, this is me, here I am unmasked, but I'll mask back up. Because I'm in the Borough Hall, so that's why I'm wearing a mask. Okay, so quickly, this is just an overview. The zoning update task force consisted of 2 members of the planning commission, Chris Petriaca and Mark Mixer. And staff members are Mike Perrone and Kevin Gore. And then Tom Esty, who's on this meeting, is the Borough Solicitor's Office, and then myself. In terms of meetings, we had a task force met monthly starting in March of 2019 to October 2020. We had 17 meetings. We met, and then in the Planning Commission, we had meetings, 5 meetings with the Planning Commission from May to November last year. These are obviously all COVID era meetings. The process was that we were instructed to overview the comprehensive plan and develop a list of provisions that can be addressed. There were some things, so what we did is we went over the comp plan, and I'm going to show you that shortly, but, and picked out everything that had to do with zoning. And then we went over that list and figured out things that were within the scope of this and other things that would take a lot more time. And so we tried to do things that we could implement fairly quickly. I think the original intent was to have it done in a year, but it didn't pan out that way. And of course, the COVID slowed things up. We reviewed the entire zoning ordinance for inconsistencies and continuities. We completely revised the maps, base zoning district, zoning overlay district, and resource protection. And we complete and reorganize the zoning ordinance, including all articles and section numbering, which was a real task in and of itself. Major organizational changes included a land use matrix for principal, conditional, special exception uses. So you can refer to that matrix, and we'll show you that shortly, and see what uses are permitted in what districts without having to go to each district to find out where that use is permitted. And then there's separate articles for base zoning and overlay districts. And then the districts are sections within those particular articles. Before each zoning district with its own article. Okay, go to the summary. Okay, this is the kind of an overview of what we did. It's not everything. And I'm going to, after I get through this, I'm going to show you examples from the comprehensive plan and how we went through that. But some of the things that we looked at was incentivizing the development of affordable owner-occupied homes. It was basically concluded there wasn't much we could do at this point without increasing density in places of the borough, and it wasn't our directive was not to accommodate increased density. We considered accessory dwelling units that felt that allowing accessory dwelling units on parcels was a policy issue and we were looking for more direction from council if we wanted to go that way. And I'll talk about that when we get into the ordinance. Parking was to implement the borough comprehensive parking guide. We reviewed the parking guide, and one of the main things we tried to do there was to make parking more responsive to current and possible future needs. The way parking is done now, there's probably 2 or 3 pages in the ordinance that have parking requirements for all kinds of different uses. And so what we revised that to eliminate those use-specific requirements and instead require the applicant to submit a parking demand analysis based on studies of parking demand for specific land uses, He's skipping over. And as an example, here, I just had some pages from from a parking generation manual that's published by ITE, the Institute for Traffic Engineers. And just to show you an example, and what's nice about studies like this is they change, they're dynamic as demographics change and land use dynamics change. You can better accommodate what those numbers are. And he's just scrolling through the table of contents, and you can kind of see the things that were monitored in there. And then I show a page when he scrolls down as to how that's reported. And this is an example of parking demand for this. I believe this is for offices. And we give the average demand. And in this particular case, the average peak parking demand was 2.84 vehicles per 1,000 square feet. And it also has suburban, urban locations and rural. And it also gives you the area, the time of peak demand, so people can do what's called a shared parking analysis more easily. But that's where you have two or three different land uses which peak parking demand at different time. So you can lower the amount of parking you actually have to provide, because so a lot of parking doesn't go unused all the time. You go back to those screen. So we did the parking, and go down more. In terms of town center, commercial service districts, ensure an appropriate mix of retail and restaurants. Amendments include changes to permit brewery, winery, and distillery uses only in the industrial district. But we felt there was really little we could do in the zoning ordinance to ensure a quote-unquote proper mix of retail. That's the language that's used in the comp plan, and I've been doing this for 43 years, and I don't know how I would accomplish that through a zoning ordinance. But regardless, we did hear loud and clear, and this is the second one, that they wanted to limit new bars and clustering of bars. And so in the amendment, the use for breweries, wineries, and distilleries, the new ones, is now only permitted in the industrial district. And I understand we'll probably be discussing that tonight too, as to that. But that's how the committee decided to address that concern. Retail overlay district and height overlay district, it was just in the comprehensive plan, it just said that those things should be retained, and they are. The town center district, ensure new development will complement historic character. And it was listed as a zoning recommendation, but actually the town center district for most of it is in the Harbor district. And the Harbor, this is accomplished with Harbor review, so the committee didn't feel there was much they could do to address that concern. But, we did note, however, that the Historic Commission ordinance could be amended to require project reviews in areas that are outside the Harbor district. Haddam Avenue and East Market and Gay Street provide for multi-story mixed-use projects. We changed the ordinance to have, we're trying to get away from one-story buildings with parking in the front yard. So the new ordinance has a minimum maximum height requirement. So buildings in these areas have to be at least 35 feet and no more than 45 feet, unless of course they're in a height overlay district. Buildings must be built to the street with no front yard parking. And so in planning and zoning jargon, it's called like a build to line. So you try to create more of a streetscape and not just a strip of parking lots. Incentivize a mix of uses. First floor retail, upper floor office and apartment. This is permitted in the town center and the CS district. And we didn't get into providing incentives, but it's required right now to have, well, it's not required to have a mix, let's put it that way, but it is required that the first floor should be retail and upper floors are reserved for office and apartment. It's hard to actually require a mix. I've been involved in a lot of ordinances where we require mix. The problem is that the simultaneous occurrence in the marketplace for that mix does not always occur. An example is the demand for office doesn't necessarily correspond with the demand for apartments. And so if you require that, you have to be patient and the developers are typically would respond by saying, well, I don't have a market, I can build it, but nobody will come. So that's a problem. The only thing I can tell you is that we have accommodated it by permitting that kind of mix in the town center and CS district. G is create standards and requirements for streetscape and pedestrian improvements. There's a new section called General Design Standards that's provided to address this issue. And wait a minute, before you go flipping, I can see Kevin moving the mouse around. The last thing is discourage additional single-story auto-oriented uses, drive-throughs in the CS district. And there we have the minimum maximum height requirement and the build to line. I want to, can you flip over to that design standard thing? There's a section. Where are we?
Give me a second.
Okay. This is a new section in the ordinance, and in my opinion, this is a real critical section. It's not in the existing ordinance, and a lot of what it does is in the existing ordinance, there was an option in the NC1 district to have a TND or traditional neighborhood development, and that is been around now for probably close to 20 years. That concept of traditional neighborhood development. And really what it's saying is why can't towns be developed the way they were 50 or 60 years ago? And that means like buildings built up to the street and they're not dominated by automobiles. So what we did is essentially with this section is make this mandatory throughout the borough. And I'm going to go through this. When an alley serves as a principal street address for a lot or a new building, new buildings shall be oriented to front the alley. New buildings shall be oriented to front the alley. However, if an existing street or an existing block serves as principal street address, at least one or more buildings on the lot shall be oriented to front the existing street. Additional buildings may utilize an alley for the primary access to the building. Front yard is required dimension based on existing setback, also known as a build-to line, unless otherwise specified in the zoning district. Main building entrance and facade must front a street, not an alley. When an alley serves as a principal street address for a lot, a new building may be oriented to front the alley. No parking in the front yard. Lots with alleys, vehicular access and parking is required from the alley. I'm sure some of you have noticed that happening around the borough sometimes where people, where a new house or whatever goes up and they put a front access parking garage when in fact it could have been accessed with an alley. Lots with alleys, garages and parking shall be in the rear, or setback at least without alleys, parking shall be in the rear, or setback at least 20 feet from the front building facade. Again, that's to prevent cars from dominating the streetscape. Streets and sidewalks. New one-way streets shall be at least 30 feet wide, and new two-way streets shall be at least 40 feet wide. On-street parking is required. New sidewalks in residential districts, sidewalks shall match existing sidewalk planting strips. When no adjacent sidewalk exists, sidewalk width shall be no less than 4.5 feet with a planting strip or tree lawn between the sidewalk and the curb of at least 3 feet. In commercial districts, sidewalk width shall be no less than specified in the saldo, and tree wells adjacent to the curb. In commercial districts, the planting strip doesn't really work because of the increased traffic. So, but you still want to have street trees adjacent to the street, and they'd be accomplished with tree wells. Street trees shall be planted between the sidewalk and the curb, which is also known as a tree lawn in residential districts and in tree wells in commercial districts. So, I mean, it's not a big section of the ordinance, but I think it really sets the stage for how we want to see future development fit within the existing historic streetscape character of the borough. Can I go back to my,
Yeah, and one thing to point out on these design guidelines, if I can just jump in here, is it was important to make sure that it was consistent with the newly adopted Saldo. So a couple of these requirements, these design guidelines are what is in our new Saldo ordinance. So consistency was important between those two documents.
okay? Where am I now?
General for.
Okay, general respect, existing development pattern, compact mix of multiple areas, the new design standards, which I just went over, requires conformance with existing streetscape, requires sidewalks. Again, the design guidelines do that. Westchester, one thing we were asked to also include was the Westchester University Education Overlay District, and it's on hold. I mean, we were originally going to incorporate that in the ordinance, but then that project is in limbo right now, so it could definitely be included in the future. Additional objectives was to review all the definitions for consistency. We need a better zoning map, easier to read, particularly at a smaller scale, and consider accessory dwelling units for family members, in-law suites, accessory dwelling units. I just say on that one, again, the in-law suites we felt were allowed now within existing buildings. We didn't have a problem with that. But having accessory dwelling units is a pretty major concern. The only thing comparable we have right now is the carriage house, historic carriage house ordinance, which essentially allows accessory uses on the building and the use of that of those carriage houses for other uses. But we didn't get into allowing additional accessory dwelling units. That we think, I think the committee felt that that's a valid objective, but I think adding that to this would create a lot of additional, say, conversation and feedback and input about how that's actually achieved. So we didn't pursue that at this point. Okay, go on. So these are some more items here. Limitation on development and redevelopment of alley frontage. I'm not really sure how that got into this, but it was one of the comments that we addressed, and it's not that we didn't think things should be fronted on alleys. It's just that we felt that if a lot has street frontage, that should be its principal frontage. If it doesn't, if it's only frontage is on an alley, then we have no problem. The ordinance has no problem with that fronting the alley. Regulations for distilleries, breweries, and wineries. This is something I'm sure we're going to talk about tonight. But it sure came up, it was mentioned a lot in the comprehensive plan, and being a resident of the borough here for, I don't God knows how many years, at least 45, I think. I know this has been a big issue over the years about downtown revitalization. As many of you probably know, I was founding member of the Business Improvement District, and when things started to change around in the borough, everyone was complaining is all we get are bars and restaurants. And I think it's obviously an issue, but I'm not, the concern here, I guess, was to try and do something about it. And in trying to figure out other ways of doing it, we just decided the best way would be to limit new distilleries and breweries and wineries. And for the time being, they're an industrial district, and I'm sure, this ordinance puts them there. But again, I think we might be talking about tonight. Consider stack parking for low turnover uses, and we did, and that has been accommodated. And then the ordinance revisions, again, the zoning districts, zoning overlay districts, and resource protection map. Can we look at those maps a minute? Just so I can start with the base zoning districts.
The one.
Yeah. Can you make that fill the screen?
it smaller.
They make it small.
You don't want to make it too much.
Well, I know, but just give me fill up the screen and then we can zero in on it if we want. But this is the new zoning map, and this map just shows the base zoning districts. There's no overlay districts. There's no resources on it. And so this is the way it is. It's very easy to read. You can print it out at 8.5 by 11 and understand it. The current zoning map, can you show that? This is the current zoning map, and it's it's a product of its time, but it's very difficult to read at a small scale, and you almost have to always blow it up to look at it. And also, it includes a lot of different things on here. It has overlay districts overlaid on top of the existing zoning districts, and all the building footprints are shown, which have changed over the years. But I'll just mention that we have the building footprint as a layer of the map, and it can be turned on, but we just felt that, particularly for viewing a small scale map, it makes it hard to read. And also, the technology has changed. When this map was developed, it was in the late 90s, and it was the early digitizing aerial photographs, and the borough paid one of their engineering companies to do those footprints. Today, all you got to do is look at a Google map or Chesco Views, and you can see the actual building. So the utility of that is not what it was at the time. That's why we don't have that turned on. And we go, and so this is the base zoning map, and just get out of the legend, just so they can see. So here's all the zoning districts, and that's how they're shown on the map. And then go to the overlay districts. Okay, so all the overlay districts are now shown on one map, and so and that makes it a little easier if anyone wants to go try and find that. One thing I failed to mention was in this, between initially starting the process of adopting this, we sent it to the County Planning Commission, and they reviewed the ordinance, and for the most part, their comments all were kind of editorial, making corrections about reference numbers and things like that. But one of the things they did mention were the way this map depicted some of the overlay districts. Unfortunately, we have overlay districts on top of overlay districts, and so that wasn't real clear. So we ended up, the transportation overlay district, which is the SEPTA right-of-way, is now shown as a hatch pattern, so you can see where it overlays the height overlay district. And similarly, the government services district, we made that a hatch pattern so people could see that there's two things to deal with there. So that's so that's so all the overlay districts are shown on that map, and there's the legend of all the things on there. We also outlined the base zoning districts so you can see where the overlay districts relate to the existing zoning districts. And then finally, there's a resource protection map. And this map has all, let's get down to the legend first, just to show them what's on it. So it includes all the environmental and cultural resources that have been documented and to date, and that are addressed in various ordinances. It also includes things like borough parks, just as reference. But it includes the flood hazard districts, which are shown in blue, the borough parks, the carriage house inventory, which I want to discuss in a moment. There's 3 National Register historic districts. There's the historic district called Boundary Increase, which was done in 2005, which is the blue line. There's a downtown historic district, which was done in 1985, and I guess I've been here long enough that I can talk about stuff that I've done. I actually did that nomination back in 1984, and it was officially listed in 1985. And then the earliest one was done by a retired professor at the college, Dick Webster, who did the Westchester State College Quadrangle Historic District. So that's right there. And then finally, there's the local historic district, which is the Harb District. And that's shown in the green line, which is coincident with the National Register Historic District, except on West Market Street. And West Market Street, that Harb District was expanded as a reaction to the proposed new Justice Center that was built down there. So the Harb District extends down there. Finally, I wanted to mention the carriage house inventory. We have that inventory of the pictures. You have that one?
I do not have it
Okay.
available.
Well, we back in 2000, when again, I've been living in this town too long. I worked on that. I did the comp plan in 2000, and one of the things that we did was inventory all the historic carriage houses, and that inventory is what's showing on this map. And in each of those parcels, there's a number which corresponds to that parcel. Excuse me, that resource. And we have a list of those resources and a photograph of every one of those. And it has the parcel number, street address, etc. We noted when we did this that there is another historic carriage house map, but it's not, the resources aren't numbered and they're not related to any particular list. So we weren't really sure the origin of that, but in the ordinance, it will be accommodated that this map can be amended and modified as necessary to address historic carriage houses that were missed in the initial survey was done back in 2000. And just for you historic preservationist buffs or whatever, we based this map on looking at old Sanborn maps that are on file at the Chester County Historic Society. And Sanborn maps are insurance maps that were incredibly detailed. They give you building footprints. It's hard to believe this is all done by hand. Of every building in the borough, it tells you what it's made of. Like, is it brick, stone? Is it frame? It tells you the roof material. It's an amazing detail. And we noted that in 1909, they actually labeled carriage houses. So we went and mapped all the carriage houses that were on that Sanborn map. And we figured after 1909, they probably weren't building any more carriage houses because the automobile was coming on. So what we did is we mapped them all and then went out in the field and took a picture of them. And those were all the extant carriage houses at that time. And I don't know if any of them have been torn down since then or whatever, but that led to the creation of the carriage house ordinance, which allowed their conversion. So that's really all I want to say about that. So let me get back to my, whoops. So we did, so they're the maps. And then into the ordinance, all this was easier said than done, but the ordinance, the section numbers, like in other words, if you went to like Article 3 and you look at the section numbers, well, the section numbers might start at 500 or something. And what happened was the way the ordinance had been originally grew over the years, they just added section numbers in numerical numbers, so they had no relation to what chapter or article they were under. So we completely revised that. So now the section numbers follow the article numbers. And I say easier said than done. You can imagine within the ordinance all the time different sections are cross-referenced. So then we had to go back and make sure all those cross-references worked. So that was a big task. And one might say, well, it doesn't really accomplish much in terms of physical zoning, but I think it makes the ordinance a lot easier to use. We created new articles and sections. Article 3 is the zoning districts. And there's a permitted use matrix, and it has primary uses, which includes all these things, and general design standards. At that point, I would take this as a segue. Can you show them that matrix? Okay, so before, you have to go to each zoning district to see what use was permitted in that district. Well, now everything is listed in this order, so you can see what the use is and where it's permitted. And scroll down. If you scroll down, I'm not going to go through all these uses, but we went through all these, and actually some of them were redundant. They're just named a little slightly differently, so we managed to combine them to try and limit them. Go ahead. And then here's our accessory uses, and then there's conditional uses that are listed here, and then uses by special exception, and they're listed. It shows you what district they're listed in. So that was a major change in the organization of the ordinance. Can we go back to the outline now? Okay. The general design standards I already went over, and then the individual zoning district requirements, they were completely revised, and each zoning district now, whereas before if you went to a zoning district, it might be 4 or 5 or 6 pages long. Now each zoning district is on 1 page, and we managed to make that more concise. And the other reason that some of those districts sections were so long is because they had all these uses with all special design requirements. Well now we've taken all that out, and we put in a supplementary section of the ordinance all this design requirements that are specific to unique uses, and so if one can see that a use is permitted there, and they go to the zoning district, and it just shows the design parameters for certain for basic uses, but anything where there's additional requirements, you have to go to the supplemental regulations to find out what those requirements would be. The resource protection standards, I've already gone at. That's all consolidated now under 1 article. Everything from floodplain to historic carriage houses. Parking and loading, I went over, and then general text corrections, definitions, and/or revised for consistency. Okay, I think, and go on. So this chart here just compares the table of contents of the existing and the revised ordinance, and you can see how it's changed. And so we don't have near as many articles, and I think the ordinance is a lot easier to use. Probably has a number of fewer pages too. But and so there's an overview of what the actual organization looks like. I don't think there's anything else on this. Oh yeah, well then these are things that are. I'm keeping a list of things that we changed to the ordinance. Since we published this ordinance, we noticed a discrepancy on lot coverage categories. I think this was in the NC1 district, so I'm having a list of like a radish sheet of minor changes, or they were just really typographical changes. Number 2 is address the county letters. And then number 3, something we realized with the median lot size is if there's a block, such as the block where the country club is, that it's only 1 lot. So we are amending the median lot size mechanism so that a block faced with 2 or less lots to use the median lot size on the face of the lot. So that's what that was done. And I just have other, because I don't know. I mean, I know it was I think that someone else pointed out to us that the reference to like carriage houses in the definition still references the carriage house map, and that reference has to change. But this is an area for opportunity to look at add additions. Finally, before I get into the discussion, I know there's been a lot of conversation about the median lot size. Can we go to that analysis? Okay. What I wanted to say, I mean, some people might say, well, why are we doing this? Well, one objective was to try and make the ordinance simpler to use, and also not to radically change the objectives of the original ordinance. When the original ordinance was done in the 80s, they classified each block based on the density of lots on that block. So in the NC1 district, you had A, B, C, and NC2, you had A, B, C, D. A, B, C, D had 4 block classifications. And in the new ordinance, we asked that the minimum lot size be determined by the median lot size of blocks of parcels on that block. I can go through how that calculation is made, but I anticipate we might get into that in the discussion. But what we did was and this took quite a bit of work. We looked at all the parcels in the NC1 and NC2 districts, and we looked at how many parcels there are, and we divided those parcels by the minimum lot size requirement in the various block classifications within those districts, and we came up with a number of parcels. But an additional issue is the parcel might be big enough that it might not be wide enough. So as an example, in the NC1A district, the lots had to be 80 feet wide. I think they even had to be wider than, I forget. So we had to get additional data from the county, because that map, that isn't in the data that you typically get. So I contacted the county, and they actually had digitized all the parcel dimensions for every lot. So then we had to do a GIS analysis, I mean geographic information system, to determine which one of those parcel widths actually fronted the street and wasn't a side parcel or an alley parcel. So we figured all that out, and then once we figured out how many parcels were at least twice the size of the minimum lot size, we then divided that by the lot width to see if enough was wide enough. And so this is what we concluded. There's like 3,300 parcels in the district, 200, scroll a bit, just so you see, 202 were actually subdividable, and the potential new units would be 356. And then on the proposed zone, and the reason that the potential units, because some of those parcels could be subdivided for multiple lots. That's why there's more lots than subdividable parcels. On the zoning build out of the proposed summary, which uses the the median lot size, we actually, through somebody I know who's great at statistical analysis, was able to generate for me a GIS map of all the median lot sizes of every block face in the borough. So we took that and did the same calculation, and so we didn't have to do it by block size. We just did it by NC1 and NC2. Same number of parcels. We found out that there's 248 subdividable parcels as opposed to 202, and 361 dwelling units. Additional complication there was that some parcel lot width requirements are smaller for townhouse units, but you can't build townhouses on one lot. So unless the lot was wide enough to build at least 2 units, we didn't count that as a townhouse development, so we didn't use that smaller lot width. And then it's all explained on this table, which is all on the borough website. And then finally, I compared the 2 districts, if you move down a bit, and we have these are the existing zoning and the proposed zoning. And in the NC1 district, it resulted in 37 less dwelling units, in the NC2, 42 new dwelling units. And the difference between the two was only 5. I mean, and bear in mind, these are, I mean, I'll call them estimates or guesstimates. Unless you actually look at each parcel, it's really difficult to determine how realistic that is. But I feel confident that we're probably, you know, in 90% or whatever error in terms of accuracy. We even took, can you go to that other map? The other thing. We even went to the trouble of plotting all these. And so we plotted them all out on a map. And I'm not going to go through each one of these, but I just want to show you that we plotted them all. And then we figured, well, wait a minute, is that parcel's not subdividable. And like to give you an example, in the lower left corner of this particular map, that's Everhard Park. Well, obviously you can't subdivide that. And other parcels we looked at already developed with apartments or had parking garages on them or whatever. So we eliminated a lot of those. And we went through all that. We wound up with a list of all these. And so these are all parcels that were eliminated from that analysis. And they were eliminated from both analyses, not the analysis of the existing zoning and the zoning of the proposed zoning. So to try and come up with a more accurate estimate. I mean, if we were to include all those, if you go all the way down, that area encompasses 113 acres. So if you would call all those parcels developable, you can imagine the way you would way overestimate potential new dwelling units in the town. Now, of course, no one's to say that any of those things can't be torn down, you know, so be it. And also, I noticed that you'll see the Westchester Country Club is on there. And that's when we realized that the scenario didn't really, the definition of the way median lot size is calculated really didn't work for a parcel of that magnitude. And so that's what we recommended, the way that definition is read, that would be based on a median lot size of, if it's less than 2 lots on a block, you use the block, the block across the street. And that has several frontages, so you could use any of those frontages to come up with a scenario. I mean, just a caveat, and this has nothing to do with the zoning committee, this is just Ray. I think that the borough should probably work with the country club to try and think about how that could be protected through development rights acquisition or open space easements, even with the help of the county. Similar to the way the Barclay grounds was preserved. That's a little aside. I know it wasn't my charge. It's just a little editorial for me. I think that's about it. And I hope I didn't take too long. And so everyone understands where we are in the process. This thing's been forwarded to the county. We've addressed all the county comments. Then it's before the Smart Growth Committee. And the process would be the Smart Growth Committee recommends this to the council as a whole. And then council has to have a public hearing with a stenographer and all this official stuff to adopt the ordinance. And that's where we are now. And so I'm getting a comment here about the audio being spanked.
That was an hour ago. It's okay.
Oh, okay. I don't know if it helps probably helps if I take the mask off, but I'm proud, I'm not bragging, but unfortunately I had my second shot last Friday. If you're old like me, you get to go to the front of the line. But at any rate, this is the process we're in right now. And so if in fact, as a result of this particular hearing, and maybe there'll be an additional, this is not a hearing, this is a presentation, that maybe the Smart Growth Committee or whatever, there will be comments to change it. If the changes are editorial and more minor in sense, it wouldn't necessarily have to go through start the process all over again. But if they are significant, then we'd have to reformulate it and send it back to the county and have another review. and start this process again. But that's where we stand now. So I'm gonna just turn it over to questions, or however, who's ever moderating this, how will they want it.
Yeah, so, Don, we will open it up to any questions or comments from the Smart Growth Committee first, or any other council members, and then we can move to the Planning Commission and public after that.
Okay, that's easy enough. Any questions from the committee? The comments?
Question about the limitations of breweries, wineries into the now I'm gonna sort of so many words, CS district, right? Correct? Or that's where you would limit breweries, wineries, and
They were limited to the industrial district.
industrial, not CS. Now the industrial that doesn't limit just restaurants, right? I feel like I had some comment this week that restaurants are being limited, but it's just specific to breweries, wineries, and distilleries, correct?
Yeah, there's two types. The restaurants have two categories: a licensed restaurant and a regular restaurant. The licensed, can you hear me?
Yeah.
The licensed restaurants are meaning that they have liquor licenses, and they're still in the downtown.
Those licensed facilities, licensed restaurants are only permitted in the town center. Well,
let me try to clarify that if I can.
Sure.
There's a definition. There are definitions now of restaurant licensed and restaurant unlicensed. Restaurant license is permitted in the town center district. Those are restaurants that hold a PLCB R license, or a hotel license, or an eating place license. So if you have one of those licenses, or you obtain one of those licenses, you would be permitted in the town center. The breweries, wineries, and distilleries hold either manufacturers licenses or limited winery, limited distillery, or limited brewery. Those kind of licensed establishments would not be permitted in the town center and would only be permitted in the industrial district. And then we have unlicensed restaurants, and if memory serves, they're permitted in the town center and I think the CS. Thank you.
That makes more sense. Thank you, Mr. Easton.
You're welcome.
Any question? Yeah, go ahead.
That was my only question so far. I'm sure I have more, but that was it, and that clarified a lot more for me. So thank you.
Bill, did you have a question? Bill, I think you have to unmute.
Hey, Bill, unmute.
There we go.
There you
Okay.
go.
Is Mike Stefano? Mike, are you done?
Yes.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. And again, what I meant when I said this was an awesome job is the way it's reorganized with these charts so that it's one-stop shopping. You can just look quick and see what's allowed where. I think that was brilliant. Now let me ask this of Ray or Kevin. The zoning districts have not changed. Is that right?
That is correct. The zoning districts have not changed.
And none of it's changed. The overlay districts have not changed?
The overlay districts have not changed. The only change that the zoning map has incurred was the elimination of the block classes. And that was due to the new method of the median block class determination, or median lot size determination, excuse me.
Well, I got that. Now the height overlay district says expansion of the height overlay district. I'm reading from your executive summary. What's that all about? It says the height overlay district has been expanded.
That,
I just heard you say that there were no such changes.
This is Ray.
Yes, right.
It might have been an old version of that, because I corrected that. And we did not expand the overlay district. It was discussed about expanding the height overlay district down Hannum Avenue.
Yeah.
And when I first put that thing together, I erroneously thought that we had, and it dawned on me that we didn't. What we did do was accommodate a minimum and a maximum height along Hannum Avenue to try and encourage better development in that corridor. But we don't have I think it's HO 70 that goes down the CS district. We didn't extend that down to on the Hannum Avenue.
All right.
That hasn't been changed at all. We tried to not get into changing any zoning district boundaries. That's a whole other process to have to adopt the zoning map revision, whatever.
All right. The reason for my question is that I printed it out this afternoon and it's still on there. So,
Okay.
Kevin, you might want to look at that and take it off. The executive summary, item number 9, I understand.
Oh, it's on the executive summary. I didn't go, oh, okay. I didn't go over that. I'm sorry. Where is the executive?
that's on the website. We can update that.
Okay,
Bill will make
yeah.
that correction, but
Expansion of the height overlay district into the CS district, where it is, if you enable multi-story mixed project, that's not in play anymore.
No, it's not. And I forgot about the fact that there was an executive summary put together, and I don't have that in my presentation.
Actually, it was a very helpful executive summary.
Okay.
Number 11 talks about parking, and frankly, I'm just confused. It sounds to me like for a single-family dwelling, you have to provide 2 off-street parking spaces per dwelling unit. But after that, parking is going to be on a, it kind of sounds like for other developments, it's according to what's being developed, and you have to ask the borough for permission about what zoning there is to be in terms of parking.
Yeah, if I can help clarify that for you, Bill.
Yeah.
If there is a land development that is submitted for a new project, let's just say it's an office building.
Mm-hmm.
They will have to submit as part of their land development plan a parking analysis based on this document that we have up on the screen here.
Mm-hmm.
That parking analysis will then be reviewed by the borough traffic engineer for consistency with the standard engineering practices for parking. This change is only it changes the way that the parking demand is calculated. Instead of having all of the different uses and parking numbers listed in the ordinance, which are generally based on an engineering study such as this, we've required developers to come in and provide us with an analysis based on this document that's on the screen here.
Okay, and then the borough would have to approve that.
Correct. It would be reviewed and have to be approved. That's correct.
I mean, Bill, if I can elaborate, this is Ray.
Yeah.
You saw those use matrix tables?
What?
The use matrix, the charts that I showed you.
Yeah.
If you can imagine having, and the existing ordinance kind of does that, it buried somewhere in minutia of the ordinance, that every, what are you doing?
Go to the use matrix.
Okay. Every one of those land uses would have a parking requirement associated with it. And that would fill up the ordinance with several pages of specific parking requirements. And all that stuff would change over the years as demographics change and the characteristics of how many people can walk, and et cetera. So what we're doing is allowing, to simplify that, is to allow parking to be calculated based on a demand analysis. And so that's the way it's done. Rather than have one size fits all for each land use. They have to do an analysis to say what is the real demand for that. And then the
Well,
ordinance.
I'm not suggesting that one size fits all, but if it's on the demand of the property owner who wants to develop the property to make an ask, and then it's decided on a parcel by parcel basis, as it were, that's kind of the only requirement there is that the national code or suggestions are need to be followed. Is that it?
Yeah, it's not, the ordinance, the document that was put on the screen was, it's ITE, which is Institute of Traffic Engineers. That's only one example. I can tell you that Montgomery County, as an example, the Montgomery County Planning Commission did a similar study recently. And so the applicant can reference whatever they want. They can reference this, they can reference Montgomery County study, or if Cheshire County ever does a study, and they could reference those studies. But we're just trying to, again, in the interest of simplifying the ordinance, trying to get away from pages and pages of parking requirements. I mean, it's a
Now, Ray, in that regard, let me ask you this. And by the way, you have an excellent looking forehead. That's all I can see of you. But I know the rest of you is down there, and I'm happy to know that. Now,
yeah, does this help?
So
Does this
what
help?
happened to all this? There used to be so many. Oh, there you are. There.
Here, I'll stand up.
There used to be so many parking spaces per unit, like in an apartment house. It would be 1.5 per dwelling unit or apartment.
Correct.
Is it all gone by the wayside now?
Yes.
Could I say one thing, Mr. Scott? It's Tom Esty. I've heard Ray say 3 or 4 times that we tried to eliminate pages out of the zoning ordinance. I know he doesn't mean that literally, and that really wasn't the motivation for doing this. I think it was what Ray explained, that for certain uses, perhaps the ordinance is overparked, and for others, it's underparked. I'm working on a project now involving a golf club, and the ordinance in that municipality is way overparked. In other words, experience tells us we don't need that many spaces. So the developer submits an analysis. Your township engineer and traffic consultant will review that analysis. Ultimately, it's the decision of the borough whether or not to accept the analysis submitted by the applicant or accepts some revised parking count. So it's an effort to not, as Ray indicated, create parking spaces where none are needed or not as many are needed. And also, there could be circumstances where more are needed than the existing ordinance provides. Thanks.
Okay, well, yeah, I got that, what Ray was saying, but what I'm wanting to know is how about this where somebody could put up a building and have their parking a block away? You know what, I forget what they call that exactly, but we've done it many times. The off-premises parking to fulfill the requirement of the parking.
Yeah, Bill, I believe under the current zoning, I believe that is by conditional use. Additionally, I think it only allows that if it's an adjacent lot or within so many feet. I can't recall the exact specific requirements offhand, but you're correct. There is a section that does allow that, but there is certain criteria they have to meet.
But my question is that all taken out now? I mean, I've read the section, but it didn't quite jump out at me. Is that in play now, or it's just not there? And we're doing it on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I believe the whole parking section was revised to reflect the requirements for the analysis.
Well,
I'm not certain. We changed the parking number count. For example, as you indicated, Bill, one parking space for every 100 square feet of retail space or whatever. But I don't think we eliminated those sections. I shouldn't say we. I don't think the draft ordinance eliminates those sections that permit parking at a remote location within so many feet of. So you'll see it there. Off-lot parking in the town center district. It's still
I
in
got you. Okay.
Still in there.
Yeah. All right. I'm not one way or the other whether what you've done here is good or bad. What does concern me is that if it's too loose, if it's too non-specific and loosey-goosey, the people who are the developers are always usually trying to whittle down the parking requirements, and you don't see any. I'm asking right. You don't see any danger of that in the way you've got it now. They have to go by these national standards, which should and the borough approval, which should help us out.
Okay, first, it's not a national standard, but I wouldn't have. Again, it's I don't want to say I because we worked with a committee here, so we all agreed on this. But the idea that that's being promoted about how demand is calculated has worked. I mean, I've worked with municipalities doing it this way. I've also in Tom Estes' comment about the parking section, we didn't touch anything else in the parking, absolutely nothing. So if there's something in there, and I'm sorry I haven't memorized it, but I'm quickly trying to go through it. If there's something in there that allows parking requirements to be settled by providing parking on a lot within so many feet or whatever, we didn't change that. That's still there. There you go. Off-lot parking in the town center district. We didn't change any of that.
So that's extant now in the current ordinance.
The language you see in front of you there is exactly the language that's in the existing ordinance. The only thing that's different is the section number.
Okay. The other question I had was, I'm looking at your zoning overlay map here.
Mm-hmm.
Got a nice big one, and the height hasn't changed.
No.
None of that's changed. Oh,
Well,
okay.
hang on. Well, the height hasn't changed, Bill, but in the CS district, there's a minimum height that you must build a building to.
I got you. Yeah, no, I know that. And so I've long been concerned about the Market Gate Street corridor, and I'm looking at your map here, and it's light green. There it is, right there. And so a building can be how high in that light green district?
That is the HO 75 today, and that has not changed.
So you can go up to 75 feet in that light green district?
Yeah, as long as you comply with certain design criteria.
I gotcha. All right, I did want to talk about the carriage houses, but I'm going to stop for now. As they say, I reserve my time. Thank you.
Anyone else have any comments? People attending the meeting?
Don, can I make a comment? Michael Gailey.
Oh, hi, yeah. I didn't see your name on the list. Sure, go ahead.
I wanted to touch on the brewery distillery question. There's been a lot of discussion over the past couple of days. I'm personally am in favor of allowing those uses in the town center. I think there are a number of restrictions that those licenses have that other licenses don't, that are generally things that we have previously promoted, you know, like a required closing time of midnight on weekends, for instance. And I think our experience thus far with those types of institutions has been that they're not really the problem children, so to speak. And in fact, I think we could probably all make a list of 4 or 5 bars that we would have a celebration if they were replaced by, you know, a local brewery. But I think one potential way to split the difference here would be to allow breweries, wineries, and distilleries in town center and the CS district as a conditional use. That would give us some flexibility to, us as council, some flexibility to deny an application if it really didn't make sense for a particular location. It would also give us an ability to obligate those applications to the existing state regulations. So for instance, I use the 12 o'clock required closing time for breweries. You know, we could make that part of the conditional application approval such that if the state changed its regulation to 1 o'clock instead of 12, our approval would still be mandating that initial 12 o'clock time, and they would have to reapply for any change. So long story short, I think we should allow those uses. If folks are worried about having some control over them, I think we should allow them as a conditional use in town center and the CS districts.
Thank you. Just for the record, I agree with Mr. Gailey for all the same reasons, so I don't have to make another statement. Same thing. Just for what it's worth, the sound quality that I'm getting, I'm barely understanding much of anything, but I'm just not one to just limit things out of hand, fully realizing the ramifications. So I would agree with Mr. Gailey for the same reasons. Does anyone else have any more comments or suggestions? John O'Brien?
Thank you. I did want to weigh in on that specific issue affecting the town center, not to necessarily beat a dead horse, because I think President Gailey kind of hit some of the points I was going to make. You know, understanding that the comprehensive plan did call for kind of limiting bars, but I think there needs to be recognition of a difference in customer profile between what a bar, when we say bar, I think we're all kind of thinking of a nuisance bar. So, you know, one that's kind of, you know, slinging essentially, you know, a lot of Bud Light or cheaper beer to, you know, college age students, not necessarily college students, but of that age, as much as possible. Breweries have a, you know, a higher price point in terms of, you know, and distilleries and wineries have a higher price point. So you're really not attracting a customer that's coming there to just, you know, try and imbibe as much alcohol as humanly possible. It's about enjoying a nice beverage. And I think when we look around to surrounding towns, Phoenixville, Media, Kennett Square, you know, even now starting in Pottstown, a lot of their revitalization has been built on, you know, that craft cocktail and craft beer industry. And I think the borough kind of could be tying our hands behind our back by not allowing some flexibility here. You know, we at the Bid, we constantly are working to promote the retail sector, but you know, the reality is the market forces are changing. Like the economy is rapidly changing, and I think the pandemic is going to continue that trend. And we need to be cautious about putting our thumb too much on the scale to try and getting a desired outcome, which could lead to, you know, unintended consequences of having a lot of empty storefronts, which hurt, you know, residential property values, attractions for other businesses. You know, in our minds, there's a symbiotic relationship between when we attract more people here to, you know, eat or enjoy a nice date night out, you know, those folks will also oftentimes either come back or shop that night at our retail stores. So, you know, if anything, you know, those bonds are kind of strengthened that way. And we have examples in town, with, Iron Hill has an R license, not necessarily a brewery G license, but we have places like Sterling Pig, outside of my area, but still in the town center. Now you have Wrong Crowd, soon to be Artillery, the Greystone Oyster House, and outside of the borough of Levante. And I don't think if we delved into, where the police issues are, they would be at those kind of establishments. So I'm fully in support with, what President Gailey says about, permitting these three areas to, be still allowed under the zoning regulations in some way. Obviously, I think we would prefer from the bid perspective just to have it in a permitted use. But if it has to be, if council finds a way that it's conditional use, I think, we could live with that. Thank you.
Can I just say one more thing, Don, while you come off mute? I actually agree with John that I'm in favor of them just being permitted uses. But in an effort to figure out a solution that maybe everyone could agree on, if that's not agreeable to the majority of council, I think a secondary solution is the conditional use solution. But just want to make it clear, if council's in favor of making those three uses just permitted uses, I'm all in favor of that. But as an alternate solution, I think the conditional use rubric gives us a nice flexibility to still allow those uses, but have a say in a context where it's really not appropriate, or at the very least to obligate them to the current restrictions that those licenses have.
Mr. Scott?
First, I want to say that every member of Borough Council is in attendance tonight. So while this is a committee meeting, we're all here, which is good. And I want to know where these breweries can go as recommended by the draft code. Where can they go?
In the institutional district, Bill.
The institutional district.
Or industrial, I'm sorry. Industrial district. Let me just clarify one thing. I think it's a good compromise to put these uses in by conditional use, and the reason being, let's say someone gets a conditional use approval to put a brewery in, and in a couple of years down the road, their business fails. We have a zoning decision from Borough Council that outlines what the requirements are for that use in that building. So it's limited, and it's buttoned up nice and tight. If you put the brewery in by right, someone has an establishment, they get a zoning permit, a building permit, they get an occupancy permit, they occupy the building, and they're serving alcohol. At that point, I think the zoning issue gets clouded if there's a different type of license, because I don't think our zoning code at that point would differentiate between those licenses and uses. So I think it's better to keep it as conditional use as opposed to permitted uses, just for the change of use down the road. And that's what you have to think about. You have to think of what's the negative side of doing what we would do. I know that's a lot of legal mumbo jumbo. I've had way too many years of zoning experience, so that's why I bring that up.
That's why we pay you the big bucks, Mike. I think those are all actually really, really good points. And there is a certain obvious benefit to retaining a level of control over those institutions that we wouldn't otherwise have if they were permitted. So maybe you're convincing me that conditional use is actually the best route.
If I could just provide one point of clarification on these breweries. And Mr. Gailey, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm sure when you talk about these breweries, you're referring to spaces such as Wrong Crowd and Artillery and such the like, where they're serving food, where it's akin to a restaurant use. If it's a brewery where they're strictly manufacturing beer with a brewery license, that's something that would be more suited for the industrial district, and I don't know that you want those facilities in your town center.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question is, and the one that I'm really thinking about is a place like Levante where they're not actually selling food, but they're also not a use that would be. I think if a place like that moved into a space in town and had a similar setup where you could, where they're brewing beer in the back but you could still go and purchase it and drink it there, would that be forbidden by the proposed change?
Well, currently, how it's written today in the draft, yes, they would only be in the industrial district. Because now you're more like a manufacturing, but I think under this, and Tom Esty can jump in here, but I believe under the state licensing regulations, if they're serving alcohol at these locations, they have to serve food with it.
Well, and if I may, it's Tom Esty. This is one of the items that I think the committee has said it's a policy decision. And we don't want to make policy decisions. So we do need the direction from council on how you want to handle this issue. And if the decision is, and I agree with Mr. Perrone that it makes sense to allow it by conditional use so we have some control. But if we go that route, then we need to draft criteria for that conditional use or standards. So that would have to be a change that we would have to work on. Because you can't just, people tend to think you can just deny a conditional use because you don't like it. Well, of course, that's not true. A conditional use is a type of by right use. And if you meet the objective criteria, you're entitled to it. So we need to develop those criteria. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. And I think to Kevin's point and your point, one of the clear delineation lines, I think, in my mind would be if the sole purpose of the institution is manufacturing, right? If you want, I don't know why you would try and put that in town center anyway. That would be a waste of your rent dollars. But if your goal is to not have customers come in and drinking or consuming your product, I think that's a clear criterion where we would say, no, we don't want you to have a manufacturing site in town center. But if you're going to have a place, like an Iron Hill where they actually brew and serve on site, I mean, I understand they have an R license, but, my example is more specific to the fact that they have actual brewing taking place at the location, but they also have service there. I think that seems like an appropriate use for a space in town and consistent with things we see now, both here and in other similar communities in our county and the surrounding counties. But I think to your point, Kevin, a nice way to delineate that in the conditional use criterion would be, something that has a demarcation between pure manufacturing and manufacturing with on-site service. And we could even like a certain,
Mr. Breslin?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I, for one, am not ready to reject the committee's recommendation in this regard. Of course, my other council colleagues are more alcohol friendly than I am, but I'm looking at the map and just going by the map. Why wouldn't we allow the breweries and such in the mixed use district and in the commercial services district? Well, I would think that an expansion of their right to be in the borough into those districts would, I think that would help. It's not the town center. But again, my thought in the comprehensive plan was that the CS district out to the east, the Market and Gay Street corridor is to be developed into interesting things besides mud lots that are across from the Borough Hall. And
Let me answer your question, Bill.
Yeah.
I think part of the reason that the quote unquote drinking establishments have been limited to town center is more of a policing and a funding issue. We're trying to corral all these places where the police at 2 o'clock in the morning or 12 o'clock at night, depending on different establishments closed, the police are spread out and they're confined to our town center district. The mixed use district, you have to be careful about that because mixed use allows a lot of residential. So there's a lot of new residential townhouses that have been built in our MU district. I'm not sure a tap room in or a brewery in that might not be a bad idea as a corner tap room like the old days. Everybody went to the corner bar, but I think that's what you might have. But the main reason why it did go, the answer your question, CS, was to kind of keep everything in town center where the police presence is late in the evenings.
Well, if you ask John O'Brien, who just spoke to us, folks who are going to patronize these establishments are high dollar folks. So I don't know. I don't think we can resolve this tonight, and I'm not sure how I feel about it, to tell you the truth. But I'm not ready to reject what the comprehensive plan called for and what is in this recommendation. That's all.
John, can I make a comment at some point? John Bracelet?
Who's speaking?
It's Pat Comerford. I just had a couple of comments.
Yeah, we'll get to you in a minute. Again, there are a couple of people ahead of you that want to ask questions and make a comment. Just before we do that, any other member of council have any comments or questions?
Mr. Bracelet, Bernie Flynn.
Go ahead.
This is the longest I've ever been quiet.
Yeah, I know.
I'm glad church is only 45 minutes. So that's the next time I'm that quiet. The only question I'd have for Mr. Esty is there a regulation on how many drinking establishments we can have in a row? Like, for example, we all love Iron Hill, but where Buddy's Burgers are, can they put another brewery 2 doors down or 1 door down from them? Is there a distance between the different establishments?
Well, if I may, I think that's an example of a criteria or a standard that might be incorporated in the conditional use ordinance. There are requirements in the liquor code on separation, but I don't think they apply to the limited brewery, limited distillery, and limited winery licenses. So that's something that we might consider if you decide to go conditional use.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a comment, Mr. Bracelet.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
So I'm in agreement with Mr. Gailey in terms of conditional use. I think just not allowing them is somewhat short-sighted in the town center. But I also think just letting them be by right, it could be a little hairy. We've already had a couple, issues or concerns on council's part in terms of the amount of alcohol being served in the town center. So I think some kind of conditional use on those makes sense, and I think I'm always in favor of the town having some kind of a say over by right for some of those iffy things like that. But I do think they're important to allow. I have another concern with the industrial use using breweries and wineries and such. It does seem like we're outside of town. It's not a big deal, but if they're serving, there is an issue of foot traffic into those residential neighborhoods like mine, which is right next to it in Ward 2. I think having some kind of maybe conditional use on that as well. I don't know if we should be throwing conditional use around to everything, but I do think that it's something to think about for my residents as well.
Sounds good. let's see. I'm gonna start taking some questions from people attending the meeting. And it does not necessarily have to be on this subject. And I have an order that I'm going to be going on, but in the order that people requested to speak. The first is from L. Kearns. If you could,
Yeah, this is Lisa Kearns. I'm the
okay.
30-year homeowner in 300 block of West Biddle Street.
Okay.
So I have a couple of questions or observations, clarifications I'm looking for about the commercial services area, particularly Hannum Avenue. I'm not too far from there. So if I understand it correctly, what's called the adult entertainment, sexually oriented establishments, they are to be clustered in these commercial services areas. Is that correct?
I think so. I don't know
Yes.
absolutely.
Yeah, and I believe that's where they are currently in our existing zoning.
Yeah, and that's what it looks like. I don't know what the existing one is, but that would be if you didn't change it, that would be
that is not a change. That's something that
right.
is existing.
Yeah, I find it interesting that the main thoroughfare into and out of town from the east and the west is where we choose to put our sexually oriented establishments. But okay, but my question then is, with the new setbacks and we will now be requiring these establishments to be right up against the street then, right? Not set back like some of the garages and things are now. Is that correct as well under the new zoning?
Yes, that is correct. Yeah. Putting uses aside, we have to look at certain planning criteria in order to provide for a unified streetscape, and by moving buildings up to the street line, that's how we accomplish that.
And of course, when you move things up to the street, that's got to start somewhere. So it just starts closer into town now. So you're moving that out further. And I just want to make that observation that indeed the places you are putting perhaps sexually adult entertainment would be right up against the street in places where you're entering and exiting Westchester from the east or the west. Just an observation. I don't know if that changes any of your thinking about it, but I found it curious.
I don't think any of that was done consciously. I think the existing uses were there. I think the goal was, as Mr. Ott said at the very beginning, one of the criteria in the comprehensive plan, and Mr. Scott was chairing that committee, he can correct me if I'm wrong, was that we wanted when the comprehensive plan was developed and ultimately approved by council, we wanted to further develop the CS district to not be single-story buildings, and with automobile repair shops and body shops and things like that. We wanted to make sure the CS districts were developed higher. Number one, so we have a minimum height of, I think it's 35 feet. You have to be up to 75 feet, which before it was max 45. And we wanted to get rid of the parking in the front and put the parking in the back of the buildings, similar to like our town center. So that was the goal.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. I wonder if for those kind of establishments, we might want to rethink something different. But I do understand what your purpose was. Thanks for the clarification.
All right, thank you so much. Next on the list is the ever popular Ann Carroll, Conscience of the East Side. Hi, Ann.
Hi, Don. Thank you. Ann Carroll, 506 South Franklin Street, speaking only as Ann Carroll. I am concerned, as Mr. Stefano noted, about the brewery, winery, distillery in the industrial district, as it does border directly on our neighborhoods, and our foot traffic already from the downtown of inebriated folks late at night is an issue. I hear what some folks are saying about higher prices, but I find that our young people are very well able to afford alcohol. They may give up other things, but that's not one of them. So I make that remark. I would be very concerned about exacerbating an existing condition in the Southeast. And that's number one. Number two is I'm concerned that we're not tackling that idea of accessory buildings for in-law suites, because it has come up a number of times at zoning hearing board. And so I think it's an important thing. And with an aging population, particularly in the state of Pennsylvania, I think it is something that we need to address. I would be in favor of it, but it has to be controlled for change of use. So that's just a comment. A question about the flood hazard district that is shown on the map. Does not this district change periodically through FEMA? That's a question.
But yeah, and it does, the maps were done, yes, revised in late 2016, 2017. But what's reflected on there should be, bear with me, I can pull it up here a second. But that layer that's shown on there was taken from the FEMA's flood insurance rate maps, and there's a national flood hazard layer that was applied here. So that would be the latest outline of the floodplain based on the latest revisions that FEMA did approximately 3 years ago.
And this is Ray, and in answer to that question is yes, FEMA does periodically update that, and the intention of this map is that it would follow that update. So this map would similarly be updated. The floodplain is regulated according to FEMA regardless of what this map, if it wasn't updated, it would still follow the current FEMA regulations.
Thanks. As someone whose house it runs directly through, I'm concerned about property values when it's shown on the map like that. But as long as it is updated and it's true, buyer beware.
And I have to say, Ann, that the outline of the special flood hazard area depicted on this map is a very great, it's a good approximation. But for exact determinations of a special flood hazard area, I wouldn't use this. I would actually use FEMA's national flood hazard layer for an exact determination. I can actually see where the structure is located on a lot in relation to the special flood hazard area.
Do you have a copy of that, Kevin?
I use it. It's online, Bill, on FEMA's website.
Okay.
And that's how I access it. But we do have copies of the flood insurance rate maps that are provided to the borough from FEMA. The national flood hazard layer is it's in better detail on their website.
Because property owners who have mortgages are impacted by where the floodplain is. There's some mortgagees want you to have flood insurance.
You're required by the National Flood Insurance Program. If you have a federally backed mortgage, you are required to hold flood insurance.
Yeah. So, all right, I'll dial it up. Thank you.
I think before if Ann's done her questions of it, maybe let me while I jumped in and interrupted you. Sorry, And the answer or maybe solution to your first question is if council, my suggestion, if council does breweries, wineries, and things by conditional use in town center, then there wouldn't be a need to have that use in the industrial district at all. If they leave it as is and leave, put them in an industrial district, then I think a way to resolve it would be to have those uses by conditional use in the industrial district. So there's a couple options there.
And if I can just add to your second point about the accessory dwelling units, that is something that the planning commission is going to take a look at. We felt as a committee that that was a pretty large item to try to incorporate into this zoning update. And there was a couple of items that we thought the planning commission should take a deep look at, and then they could provide a presentation to Borough Council. That's something that may be incorporated in a later amendment to the zoning ordinance.
What are the others, Kevin?
My last two questions have to do with my favorite thing is parking. One of them ties into the median lot size issue, but it could generally address. Was there any thought given to increasing the residential parking requirement in permit parking areas as they are currently designated? In other words, make it something that is reflective of current permit parking, allowing new development along with this median lot size thing. If there is new development, and indeed, if there is any new development, whether it's a reaction to the median lot size or whether it was already allowed, requiring the 2 residential spots in a place that is already overwhelmed with parking is not sufficient. So I'm wondering if there's a way to tie a parking requirement to permit parking and either say, if it's in a permit parking area, it needs more, or it will not be given permit parking, so build it in a way that will reflect that.
To answer the question, no, we did not look at it from that angle, and we left the residential parking as is, as it's stated in the ordinance today with the 2 off-street parking spaces.
I think that you should think about that because there is no more room for any more cars, whether development is done or not. And just a thought for the group to consider. And I thank you. And that's it for me.
Thanks, Ann. Appreciate it. Next, we are going to go to, I think it's Bill Lynch. Bill, you out there?
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Don. And
yeah,
good evening, everyone. First, I want to say overall that I think they did a fantastic job putting this new plan together. It's absolutely readable and it's absolutely clear the way the graphics are done on the new map. So just congratulations. That doesn't mean nothing gets a question, but I think they did a wonderful job. I do want to go back to the alcohol question. I think I'm perplexed, and I just want to support my council person, Bill Scott, thoughtfulness on this issue, that he wants to consider it more. And I want to make sure that the voice is heard. And the voice is, how many drinking establishments do we actually need? But driving that question is, what is the direct benefit of drinking establishments to the borough? I understand that there's a theory out there, but I haven't ever seen the data, that it brings people to town, and that in theory creates some consumers who could go to other types of establishments in the town center. And that all sounds fine, but as we replace the outlets for other kinds of goods with drinking establishments in the town center, what is there going to be to buy? So I just wonder why we don't put a limit on the number of drinking establishments, and whether they're breweries or whether they're distilleries or whether they're bars, and if they all have to serve food. I just think it would be prudent to suggest that you can only handle so much of that in an area. Otherwise, it becomes a watering hole. And that's not exactly the way I think we ought to think about the evolution of the town center of Westchester. So one of my real questions is, what is the direct benefit? Because it's my understanding that we don't derive tax revenue from the alcohol. And there might be some tax revenue from the food, but it's never been presented that I've heard adequately, at least, to suggest that that's a net gain, when in fact you look at the cost of policing and the cost of the impact on the quality of life. And the second, coupled with that, is this question. I'm pretty sure we all know that cannabis establishments are not far behind. And if we look at the rest of the world, I think that's going to become part of Westchester as well when the legislation allows it. So I'm just wondering what provisions we've made or thought about in terms of where those establishments will be located and how many there will be of those as well. So I'm not really ramming this. I just want to make sure there's a voice spoken about the character of the town and the focus on becoming an alcohol-related driven economy. So that's my comment. And the question that I'd like to hear is, have we considered the unintended consequences of just driving business to alcohol-related establishments?
Okay, thank you, Bill. Actually, so long as Mr. Scott's around, I probably won't have to worry too much about that. But, thank you so much. And next, we're going to go to, I think it's Barb Clark. Hold on a second. Wait a minute. Before anyone starts talking. Brooks Clark.
Thanks, Tom.
Hi.
Brooks Clark, 532 North Walnut Street. So I have a prepared statement and then also some questions and comments in response to what has been presented this evening.
Okay.
Now I have serious concerns with the proposal to use block-based median to calculate minimum lot size as described in section 112-305 general design standards. I want to be clear, I've not reviewed the entire proposal and therefore I don't have comments on other sections of the proposal, just the block-based median. And furthermore, my family would not be personally affected by the implementation of block-based median. Despite repeated mention that the proposal represents a smoothing out and reorganizing of code, or a simplification of code, or a clearing up of ambiguities, the proposed use of block-based median is absolutely a policy change. The proposal would cause dozens of property owners to lose the eligibility to subdivide their land, thereby robbing them of use options and reducing property value. At the same time, other owners would gain the ability to subdivide in an arbitrary manner. The result is some winners and some losers. The block-based median formula has been proposed without providing any reason or evidence why it is better than the existing block class system. I would also like to mention that in addition to the proposed change to minimum lot size, there are also changes in minimum lot width, setbacks, etc. For example, in our current zoning, NC2 block class C semi-detached indicates a minimum lot width of 20 feet. The proposal would change this to 30 feet. So here again, we see policy change. Throughout this process, there have been repeated statements that the zoning code is a living document, but we cannot adopt this position. The effort expended thus far on this proposal, combined with the effort yet to be expended, not to mention the associated financial costs, is huge. Putting forward our best effort and later realizing that we missed something can be expected. However, this is very different than conceding that there are potential problems and explicitly planning to revisit these problems later. Now, perhaps budgetary and time constraints have adversely impacted this project. If that's the case, that's understandable. However, it is the case, we must alter this proposal so it truly does not affect policy. Conversely, if we're going to produce a document that affects policy, then let's do so in a way that truly helps meet the recommendations of the comprehensive plan. For example, in the housing section of the comprehensive plan, it says strategies should be developed to provide new workforce housing that is affordable to people who work in Westchester. And if we're going to take on a challenge of policy change, we must proceed with a full analysis, impact and otherwise, proper portrayal and publicity of the significance of the changes, and a full vetting from everyone affected. That was my prepared statement. I just have a couple questions. The first is regarding the zoning update task force. Do we have minutes from that available on the borough website?
I don't know.
No,
Somebody know that?
No, there's no minutes available on the borough website for those meetings.
No, not publicly, not public meetings. No record of what happened in those meetings.
Are we,
I think, no, hang on, Kevin.
Yeah, go ahead.
What happened in those meetings is in front of you tonight.
Okay.
Okay. So my next comment is on the slides that Ray presented, the existing build out versus the proposed build out. Existing build out 202 subdividable. I think I saw 356 potential new units, and then proposed build out 248 subdividable, 361 potential new units. I just want to point out that the 202 subdividable is not the same units or lots as the 248. In other words, just because there's 202 lost and 248 gained, just because there's 202 before and 248 after, you don't know who is gained and who is lost. So that build out analysis, I think, is quite different than, some of you maybe have seen the numbers, the impact analysis that I did, which tries to narrow down to who are the winners and who are the losers. So again, the impact analysis that I've produced, very different than the build out analysis. Build out analysis, my understanding, just kind of general numbers, doesn't identify who's going to win and who's going to lose, who's going to gain subdivision eligibility, and who's going to lose it. I think the only other thing I have is, I think I heard that there's a change to the block face definition, in that there's an exception if there were two lots on one block face, then the opposite, the lot on the opposite side of the block would count. Did I hear that properly?
Yes, we realize that, especially with the parcel, which is the golf course, that it's only one parcel that spans block, street to street. It creates its whole block. We realize that that creates its own median. So where you're having situations such as the golf course where there's only one parcel, or if there's two or less parcels that create a block, you can use the block face that is across the street to determine the median lot size.
Okay. I mean, really, the only thing I want to say here is that there's been some debate about how block face is calculated, whether there's alleys count or not count. And I can tell you that I've tried running my impact analysis in different ways because of the ambiguities. When I looked at lot space, I didn't know how really to do it. So I tried different combinations. And in the end, it's more or less similar impacts in terms of, dozens of lost and dozens of gained eligibilities. So I just wanted to point out that if we, tweaking it here and there, it's not going to make a big difference. I could generate lots of real examples where there are lots with proper street footage so that they could meet minimum lot width, and subdivide. It's, a little tweaking here and there is not going to, is not going to make a difference. In the end, you just can't take away people's property rights. We just can't do that. It's not American, and it's potentially not legal.
If you'd like to, we have to move on, but if you'd like to put that together, pass that on to us, that could be helpful.
I'm sorry,
of course, it's your
Tom,
right to do that. I'm sorry?
What did you ask me to pass on?
Well, you were talking about a study. I mean, if you have any available data that you'd want to share, that would be fine.
Yeah. I've sent it out.
Not tonight though, but yeah.
I've already done it. I've already sent it out.
Okay.
No, I mean, again, I can go through lot by lot and study them and figure out, yes, this is a true subdivision, which I've done to some degree, but frankly, it really shouldn't be up to me to have to do that. I will do it if I have to, but it really shouldn't be up to me to do it.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for your comments and your questions.
Thank you.
Stay in touch, but I've seen you on the various media, so I know you will. But thank you so much. Appreciate it. Next, I think Barb Clark, I think you're up next. Are you still there?
Thank you. I'm on the Sustainable Advisory Committee in Westchester. Barbara Clark. I live actually in West Goshen. But I guess my question is, after Brooks presented what he did, can the property owners who want to subdivide be grandfathered and allowed to do so? Is that something that our zoning, or would that be something you could write in there so that nobody loses?
Well, I think the answer to your question, Barb, and the last comment from Mr. Brooks was, can the borough take away people's property rights? Well, unfortunately, that's exactly what zoning law is. Zoning law takes your property and puts restrictions on what you can and can't do with your property. So if you can do something today, there's no guarantee a zoning code doesn't change and you can't do something tomorrow. That happens all the time. And I just want to remind Mr. Braceland, I think we're past 7:30, so if you want to.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to ask you, is there any action we have to take on this evening?
Yeah, you can just say everything's wonderful and have a public hearing in 30 days and approve it.
Okay.
Or you can continue to have another meeting.
Don, can I say two things? Just two comments?
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just figured out the chat. I'm sorry. Just real quick. I appreciate all the work done too. And I understand the matrix. And I'd certainly like to see a couple of those boxes checked in the right direction in the town center with the breweries and the wineries. And I just want to give an example of why I think it's so important. Before I ran into the eyeglass store next to us, we were entertaining a tasting room with three of the vineyards, Borderland, Penwoods. We were really excited about it. We wanted to put that together. Something to supplement our retail business, to build a little traffic at night and to try to get some some of all these diners that come into the store. I mean, we're open for night after night and no one ever comes in. And so you try to get creative. We all have to be creative. So these kind of uses are the way you have to be creative in retail. You know, our greatest retailers are failing today. You know, and it's a myth to think that if we don't get creative and don't allow uses, you know, the retail overlay district was started 20 years ago when the borough was going to make every retail business permanently retail. And I remember fighting that 25 years ago. And I thought that was a compromise. So I hope we can come up with a compromise on this. And I hope we can be creative and help the town center thrive, because the property values and the people who live in this town, I see them loving to live in town because they can walk uptown, have a drink, not worry about driving home, and have dinner. And I think we don't have a lot of intimate small spaces for wine bars, small breweries. Something like the Tria wine bar in Philadelphia, I used as a model. It was fantastic. And I only didn't do it because I found somebody who had a bird in hand and it was an eyeglass store. So we have to be creative. And I guess that's what I'm trying to do. And this is very restrictive, and I think it's an overreach. So thanks for you all received my letter, and thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, we have to wrap this up. Mr. Prohm, one more time, what are our options for tonight?
If you're not, settled on doing anything tonight, which I'm not seeing any indication that you are, then I would suggest you schedule another hearing.
Okay.
Or not hearing, excuse me, another public meeting.
Another meeting.
To talk about the proposed draft.
All right.
And at some point, smart growth committees, should make some recommendations to the committee that drafted this document, and say what you want to keep, what you want to throw out, what you want to change, so the process can continue on down the road.
Okay. Okay. So, all right. So why don't, there's a lot undecided here. Why don't we meet again 30 days and then do something more definitive at that point? Is that agreeable to the other members of the committee?
Yes.
Bill?
Matt, this is Ray.
Oh yeah, okay, Ray.
When it's my turn, I have a question.
Okay.
I would just like to know if there's anything that the committee should be doing in the meantime. If you're going to have another meeting in 30 days, is there any more information or drafts of changes that you would like us to make? I mean, I've heard a lot about as an example, about the breweries and the wineries and that sort of thing, and making it conditional use. And so I would anticipate coming up with a draft of how that could be accomplished. I just want to know if there's anything else that the committee should address for the next meeting.
I don't know. It seems as though the brewery was the brewery concept was one that seemed to pique interest. And I don't know if we would discuss it at the time, but Daley was the minimum lot size issue, if that is an issue. So we might be able to limit the conversation to that. Mr. Scott, we have to get rolling here. Go ahead. Bill, go ahead.
You're on mute, Bill.
Yeah.
You're still on mute, Bill.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
You can?
Yep.
Oh, okay. As I said before, I wanted to talk about the carriage houses, and I gave Ray and Kevin a memo or a letter about that this afternoon. And in direct response to what Ray just asked, it would be nice if we could if we could sharpen up the carriage house map. There's 3 properties that, I wouldn't say that are at issue, but 3 properties that need to be resolved, and that is carriage houses, and also, Ray, I might give you another email about the substance of what is said about the carriage houses in the text. So if that answered your question, if you're about the carriage houses, I am.
And,
Okay.
am I unmuted?
No, you're on.
I'm unmuted?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think we can have that prepared by the next meeting. And I mean, as I said, there are several lists of carriage houses that I was just trying to come up with what's the best resource. And so I've compiled a map that was done and I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, and also I have a list that Kevin found among his files. So we'll look at that and try and update it. I certainly don't have time to go back to the Historical Society and review all that. But the ordinance in the definition of carriage houses, which can be changed because of a reference, is wrong, a cross-reference in the definition. That definition of carriage houses can be changed to accommodate how that official list is determined and how it's inventoried. And so we'll do that for the next meeting too.
Okay.
Well, I was very involved at the time, and so I'd like to thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Now, should we decide the date of the next? Should we decide the date of the meeting tonight, or is that something that we can do at a later date?
It'd be if you can do it right now, it'd be great. You have all these people on the phone, so.
All right, fine. Let's do it. Let's do it now. I do not have a calendar in front of me. Darn it. Hold on.
It's on your computer.
Yeah, well, I know that. Just gonna have to get it. Oh, here we go. All right, now.
Why don't you do the same night, the Thursday night after the week after your council meeting?
That's what I was thinking. So that'd would be 18th, I think.
20.
Or the 25th.
25th, yeah.
25th.
Yep.
Let's do that. 25th at 5:30.
Agreed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ooh, I didn't have to fight with you this time. That's great. Okay.
Am I unmuted?
Yeah, you're unmuted.
This is Ray. And
yes,
I cannot make that night, but I don't want to hold.
Okay.
I don't want to hold you guys up. So.
Okay.
I will supply, whatever. I'll work with the group and supply whatever I can for that meeting, but I won't.
Okay.
I won't be able to attend it.
Mr. Preissman. Mr.
Yes,
Preissman.
Mr. Scott. Yep.
What about the day before, Wednesday the 24th?
No, that whole week is shot for me.
Oh, you on vacation?
None of your business.
All right.
All right. Let's do it the
25th.
25th, 5:30. Okay.
5:30?
So-
Okay, good.
So shall it be written. All right, unless there's anything else, which isn't, we are adjourned for the evening. Thank you, everyone.